Hello and welcome back. It is Monday. I am Mr. Sosotris, and this week I wanted to do a wrap-up of my reading in January. But this is the general overview of what things happened in January, what I liked, what I didn't like, and what I'm looking forward to in February. So let's get into it. So first up on the list, I want to talk about series that I finished in January. And I did a video about this already, but I finished The Expanse with Memories Legion. This is the last book in the series. I was going through the rest of them digitally, but I do have this one physically because this is a collection of short stories. And so in the future, if I want to reread the series, which I most definitely will, now I can sort of read each story as I go in order. I think that would be really cool. This time I read this at the end as kind of a victory lap through the series as I finished it, but next time I go through, I do want to be able to read kind of the short stories in order in between each of the books as I go. Overall, I really loved this series. Definitely one of my favorite sci-fi series going forward, and I am looking forward to rereading it in the future. Now, the next series that I finished was a series of DC graphic novels, and this was Batman and Superman World's Finest. This was recommended to me by someone online. I've kind of been wanting to get into comics more. I really love the art style, and I love superheroes, but I always felt really overwhelmed and stressed out by sort of the entry points because there's so much lore, and there's some stuff that are in one universe, there's some stuff that is like rebooting, and I never knew where to get started. And so someone suggested this was a good place to start for DC because it sort of goes through everything, it introduces everyone, and it doesn't require a ton of extra knowledge of other stuff. And I really enjoyed this series. It's a series of 4 graphic novels, and it says in some places online this is an ongoing series, so I don't know if it will keep going, but either way it does end kind of in a good place, and it was a lot of fun. It features kind of all of the DC characters. It is like the main focus is sort of the friendship between Batman and Superman, which is always great, but it was really great to see sort of all of the other characters from like the Justice League and the Teen Titans and all that sort of make cameos here and there. Oh, and there's a cat here. There we go. Yes, I know. But overall, this was a ton of fun, and I didn't feel lost at all, so this was a really good entry point into the kind of world of the DC Comics universe. So I'm looking forward to reading more in that universe, and I've kind of gotten past my initial sort of hesitation, so I'm just going to kind of dive in and continue to explore that. Next up, I wanted to talk about series that I started in January, and the first one was the Star Trek Vanguard series. I read the first book, Harbinger, and I liked that one a lot more this go-around than the first time I read it. I think the first time I read it, I wasn't in a good receptive place for that particular series, and it just didn't work for me then, because it's very morally twisty, and it kind of pushes at the edges of what kind of the optimistic Star Trek future is, but it definitely fits into the feel of everything else really, really well, and it feels kind of like a combination of like the original series, Deep Space Nine, and Discovery all kind of mixed together. But it was enjoyable, and I'm looking forward to continuing that series. I also started the McMurdo series by Bradley Lejeune, the first book, McMurdo Rift. This is very much a serialized, ongoing story, so it kind of ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, but this was a lot of fun. It kind of felt like those like late 90s, early 2000s sci-fi TV shows that you just loved and watched every week, and it was just an enjoyable ensemble cast. It was a lot of fun, so I'm looking forward to continuing with this series. Next up are my favorite nonfiction reads of the month, and I only read 2 nonfiction books, and I couldn't choose between the 2 of them. I really enjoyed both of them for very different reasons. The first one was Will to Change by Bell Hooks. I really, really enjoyed this one. This is talking about sort of deconstructing patriarchal masculinity. It talks about the ways that even feminism ties into masculinity sometimes, and so in order to deconstruct sort of the harm that it does to both men and women, you do have to deconstruct a lot of those kind of patriarchal ideas that have influenced kind of all realms of thinking. And it was really thoughtful, really insightful, and it was just one of those reads where like I want to go back through it and just underline all of the quotes that exploded my brain, because it was really, really compelling, and I think more people should read Bell Hooks. She's wonderful. The other nonfiction book that I went through was A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. This was an audiobook, and this one was incredible. It followed kind of the whole history of the US, but it focuses on the point of view of minorities and underrepresented groups, and the way that there are so many details that are sort of glossed over a lot of times. It really was a compelling read. Now, it was a difficult read because it's basically just war crimes and atrocities from beginning to end, but it does give a whole other like perspective on looking at American history, because it really paints this picture that American history, so much of it is the history of big corporations and wealthy landowners mostly. And so it doesn't say, this is pure evil or this is whatever. It just looks at how the system, when you prioritize the needs of profit and big businesses and wealthy landowners and the super wealthy, when you sort of cast them as sort of the economy and make everything that you do based around making sure the economy is safe and thriving, it does so much damage to sort of the everyday people. And there was a lot of struggles and upheavals as people sort of fought back against the system and found ways to sort of fight for like workers' rights and, the civil rights movement and women's rights and everything. It was really, really interesting, and I really enjoyed this one. This is one I went through it on audio from the library, but I have ordered the physical copy, because this is definitely one I want to go back through again, and I want to again sort of annotate it and pick out sort of the really compelling quotes, because there was a lot of them that I was reading them and I was like, that's so good. Really, really compelling read. Would definitely recommend it, but it is incredibly depressing and bleak, so be warned. Next up, I wanted to talk about my favorite standalones, and I think I read 3 standalones the last month, and I honestly enjoyed all of them. But if I want to narrow it down to just 2, my first favorite was The Painted Veil by W. Somerset Maugham. This one, I was not expecting to be as affected by this one as I was. It was recommended by someone on TikTok, and it was sort of a classic I'd never heard of before. I'd heard of the author's name, but I'd never heard of this book before. And it basically tells the story of this spoiled, selfish, manipulative woman who is cheating on her husband at the beginning of the book. And we get to see her and her husband are then put into a situation where they're both in danger. And we see sort of her worldview shift and adjust over time as she's able to sort of grow up and move past a lot of her hang-ups. And she finds this sort of nuance and maturity in her worldview that is just really, really compelling. I loved this book. It's a short book, it's a quick read, but it is so gripping because it starts off kind of in the middle of things while she's in the middle of having this affair, and then we get a flashback, so we see kind of how this all started, and then it carries on forward and we see how their lives sort of change. And this book was really, really fantastic. The other standalone that I really enjoyed this month was The Seventh Veil of Salome by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I love everything she's written, so this was sort of a no-brainer, but this one was so much fun. It's almost campy, but not quite, but it's sort of sumptuous, and it's all about sort of 1950s Hollywood, and then there's also a historical fiction element in the Holy Land way back when during the Roman occupation, and the struggles and the drama of sort of being up-and-coming actress in 1950s Hollywood. It was so much fun. It doesn't take itself terribly seriously, which I really appreciated. I think this could have been a very pretentious idea, but Silvia Moreno Garcia is so good. She never does anything like that. She always just tells good stories with compelling characters that you love, and the cat is yelling in the background, so just ignore her. She's fine. But this one was a lot of fun. I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. And I've heard that the author is coming up with another book. She's a machine. She just churns out books so fast. I don't know how she does it. I don't know if she like sleeps ever. But she does have another book up and coming, and so I'm really excited about that. I think her next one might be horror. She's done a couple books in that genre, and she does that really, really well. So we'll see how that goes. But everything, she's definitely one of my favorite authors for a reason. Everything she's written is just wonderful. So would recommend this one. Next up, I want to talk about books that surprised me. And the one that really, really blew me away was Darkness Outside Us. And this one was, I don't know really what I was expecting. It was sort of YA, sci-fi. I know it had kind of a queer storyline, but it was also sort of a mystery. And what I got was sort of this combination of Project Hail Mary with like Moon and 2001: A Space Odyssey. It was so complex, and the reveals and the twists and turns were just really, really compelling. There are parts of it that are terrifying. There are parts that are funny. There are parts of this book that are really wholesome. There is sort of a relationship at the center of it, and it's not what you think. And so this one really, really impressed me. There is a sequel. I've heard the sequel isn't sort of as well regarded as the first one, but I do still want to read the second one. I've really enjoyed this author's writing style, so I'm curious to see where the series goes. And next up was sort of books that disappointed me. And I don't normally like to do negative reviews, but there was one series that I started in December, and that is the Just Cause series by Ian Thomas Haley. And I really enjoyed the first book. That's sort of superhero fiction with a big cast of characters, and it's a very long-running series, and I was excited to get into it. The first book was fun. The first book is kind of YA, as kind of an entry point. The second book feels more like an adult novel, and I think as you go through the series, there's kind of a mix of sort of YA and adult novels, but it's a long series, and I really liked it. The concept was great. The superhero team that the author created is really interesting, and there's some really compelling characters, and so I was really into it. And the second book, the plot was really interesting, and the stuff that happens to the characters is really good, but there was a number of like really tone deaf sort of moments of stereotypes and sort of clunky depictions of other cultures, and it felt like it could have used a sensitivity reader. It was never racist, and so I do want to keep reading the story, and I don't want people to go after the author, because I do like the author, but the book just felt clunky in the way that it sort of depicted people of other cultures. And I don't know, it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel hateful. It wasn't that. It just kind of felt clunky and sort of ignorant in a way that it was depicting things. So I don't know. I do want to continue the series because I really enjoy the team up and I like the characters. Then so I'm looking forward to seeing if the series sort of matures as it goes on, because it is quite a long series. There's like 30 or 40 books now. And he's been writing it for a while. So I feel like this is an early book. It's kind of one of those examples of like early season episodes of TV shows where they're still trying to kind of figure out the feel of it, but we'll see how it goes. Now looking forward to February. February is Black History Month, and so I want to prioritize Black authors throughout the month of February. And I've got a number of books that I haven't read yet that I do want to, so these are the ones that I'm kind of most excited about. I just started The Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. I have two or three more books of hers that I haven't read, but two that I actually own, and so this is the next one that I want to read. I've loved everything Toni Morrison's done. Definitely one of my favorite authors, and I'm really excited to get into this one. Also, I've got another book by Bell Hooks. This one's all about love. This is kind of the one that's the most well known of hers. Everyone sort of talks about this one, and I've read excerpts of this in college, but I want to read the whole thing. Next up, I want to read N.K. Jemisin's short story collection, How Long Till Black Future Month. This one, I've read a few of the individual stories in here, the ones who stay and fight, which is sort of a response to a Ursula K. Le Guin story, the ones who walk away from Omelas. But this is one that I want to kind of get through. It's a pretty big collection, so I'm really excited. I love N.K. Jemisin, and I haven't read a ton of her short works, so I'm looking forward to getting into this one. Also, I want to read Zora Neale Hurston's Mulebone. I think Langston Hughes also contributed to this one. She's a really kind of infamous and famous writer of the Harlem Renaissance. She's a really important author, and I really love the way that she works in folklore, and she captures the culture and the language of Black people in the 1920s and turn of the century America really, really well. So I do want to continue to read her stuff. There are a lot of really fantastic Black scholars who are very critical of her and who can kind of point out the sort of idiosyncrasies of her beliefs and the way that she was progressive in some things and not in others. So she's a really interesting person to read about, but I don't want her to be she's pure evil and we need to cancel her, because that isn't productive. But you do need to sort of be aware of sort of the author's flaws and the way that she fit into her community and what she was writing about. But she was very focused on folklore, and she was a really accomplished anthropologist, and so I do think we need to keep reading her work. We just need to be aware of kind of the nuance of her life. And then finally, I want to read the whole Children of Blood and Bone series. I've read the first book before, but I do have the second and third books, and I want to read kind of the whole series. I know there's a film version coming out soon that people are really excited about. I remember really enjoying the first book, and so I definitely want to read the whole trilogy, and I want to kind of do it all in one go instead of leaving lots of space between the different books. So we'll see how it goes, and I'm looking forward to it. January was a really good month. I think last year I hadn't been reading very much, and I would get through maybe 5 or 6 books a month. This month I've really tried to focus on just not worrying about focusing on books that are either important or popular, or focusing on books that are short just so I can kind of get through them quickly. And I've just been sort of reading whatever I wanted, and so I was able to get through quite a few books this past month, which I really appreciated. So I'm looking forward to February, and I'm really excited to hear about what you read in January. What was your favorite book of January? What were some things that surprised you about what you read? Let me know in the comments. And with that said, I will let you go. I will see you next week, and in the meantime, happy reading. Bye.